Also brought to you by the Boatyard in Fort Lauderdale. Eat local, but stay coastal at the Boatyard Restaurant. The Boatyard is located at 1555 Southeast 17th Street in Fort Lauderdale. That means you can come by boat or you can come by car. Enjoy the nautical atmosphere whether you sit inside in the cold AC or outside on the patio bar. The Boatyard has something for everyone. Monday through Friday, happy hour, where local favorite is bar bites and handcrafted cocktails. Open for lunch, dinner, and the popular Sunday brunch. And don't forget, Ladies' Night, every Thursday night from 7 to 10 p.m. where ladies drink free. Dock and dine at the famous Boatyard in Fort Lauderdale. I am sure you'll have a great experience.
Clear the airways. The Lunker Dog is on the air.
Are you ready? This is the Real Guy Podcast.
Hey everybody, this is Captain Jeff, and welcome to the Real Guy Podcast. We are the day of LunkerCon, and I got a special guest. That's right, Tom Roland is in the house today at the Lunker Dog Studios. Tom, thanks for coming in.
Thank you. I'm excited.
I'm excited. It's always like the weirdest feeling before we do LunkerCon. I don't know, years ago when I played football, I had that feeling, you know, like a little butterfly in your stomach type thing. And, but getting the guys together and doing this thing is going to be a lot of fun, and I'm so glad you're here.
Well, I've heard about LunkerCon, and this is my first try, so be gentle.
Oh, dude, the people are going to love it. The people are going to love it. And I don't know, I think the thing about LunkerCon is, especially guys like you that got TV shows and have, you know, personality, when you come to events, you know, you're expected to talk, you're expected to do a presentation or whatever. At LunkerCon, the only thing you're expected to do is to be Tom Roland.
All right, cool.
Yeah, so very excited, very excited. I want to talk about your podcast. You're one of the reasons that I'm doing a podcast.
Yeah.
I was listening to yours, and I was like, man, I said, this is good stuff. I said to myself, it's the type of content that I think people need at this point in time. You know what I mean? Like music, I don't know. My kid, she listens to some music. I try, you know, to get in with the new music, and, you know, I was always into music, but it's just not doing it for me now. And YouTube, of course, is where I spend a lot of my time, you know, watching, because you can basically get everything on there. And but listening to your podcasts, it brought me, you know, to a whole different state of mind.
Yeah.
You know, and I think you do a great job doing that.
Well, thanks. I listen to a lot of podcasts, just on all different subjects, and I kind of thought, you know, take the same kind of idea and talk to some of the people that I know that I'm inspired by, that have really cool stories, like a Bill Dance or Roland Martin, or, you know, some of the icons, or some of the young guys that are getting started in the fishing industry. And my show's not all about fishing. It's about, really, the other day I started to book a guest on the podcast, and he's like, I don't know anything about fishing. I said, well, this isn't, really this podcast is, while it has a lot of fishing elements, it's really about people that are taking an alternate path in life. People that could be doing something else, but are choosing to do something that they love. And in that path of choosing something to do what you love, there are all kinds of challenges, and there are all kinds of failures usually.
Sure.
And that's what interests me as much as, and I like it when it's a fishing story, because I can relate to that, and I can bring some of my own failures and successes and just experience to the conversation. But when it's something outside of fishing too, it's also very interesting to me. And apparently it's interesting to some other people, because it continues to grow, right, and I'm having fun with it, so I'll keep doing it.
Yeah, and, you know, having the TV shows, I don't think there's too many people in the audience that doesn't know that, you know, you have your TV shows Into the Blue and Saltwater Experience.
And another one, Sweetwater too.
Sweetwater, right? And, you know, there's only so much you can do, you know, with TV, and as far as you're just time constricted. It's a lot of work, and it's structured in a way that, there's only so much you can do. Where when you have an hour, 45 minutes, an hour and a half, to go back and forth, I really think that, especially people in your position that have an audience and that are into, whether it be fishing, and I know you're into working out, but if you have an audience, I just think that it's exactly what they need. They need more, than just TV.
I don't know if they need it, but a lot of people want it.
Yeah, they need it, want it, but there's a demand there.
Yeah, well, there is, and we were talking earlier about the podcast. I feel like with the audience that I have created, I've certainly received more messages, more. I'm not just going to say messages, not like text messages, but like emails of people telling me what this podcast has meant to them, telling me what it meant to them to hear the stories of other people, and that they're going to try to do what they want to do now because they have learned all these lessons from other people. That means a lot to me, but it also means that people are connecting with it and that they're actually getting something of great value out of it. And that's all I ever wanted for it. And selfishly, I wanted to hear these stories for myself, like of some of these people, and most of these guys are my friends in some way, shape, or form. I wanted to hear that story for myself, like how Bill Dance started. I didn't know,
right.
And turns out he started. It's not an accident that he did what he has done. It took a tremendous amount of hard work. He worked a lot harder than other people were willing to. And he basically never said no to an opportunity. And, fast forward 50 years, and that's what it takes to be Bill Dance. I mean, really hard work, And
yeah.
Most of the guests are, it's a similar story. I also find there's one theme that continues to come up on the podcast, and that is that what people thought when they first got started, like, I can't do that because of this or because of that or whatever that reason was for someone. I can't do that because I don't have any experience. I can't do that because I don't know anyone. I can't do that because I don't live there.
Right area, right.
Whatever it is that most of these people had that in some way. And that thing that they thought was going to be the greatest challenge turns out after a while to be their greatest advantage in their success. I find that really interesting. Like,
it's reoccurring.
Yeah, it repeats over and over again that somebody thought that because they didn't know anything about saltwater fishing that they wouldn't be able to do it. But the fact that they didn't know anything made them work so much harder than someone who was raised doing it, maybe. And they didn't even realize that there was this point to where the tide turned a little bit,
Right.
and all of a sudden they're knowing more than they ever thought they were. And in fact, but they don't. There's like this habit of always learning more, right? Where somebody else might think, well, I know plenty,
Right. I see like the amount of interesting people that you're able to interview. Have you found that like is it hard to approach people that that are cool or have a name or whatever, even though you don't know them that well, but now you're going to sit down and talk to them for an hour and a half?
Yeah. Well, if it's in the fishing world, I think that that hasn't been a problem because I've only been turned down once by somebody in the fishing world. Maybe twice.
What do you mean turned down?
They just said they didn't want to do it.
Okay.
they said, no, I'm kind of busy. Doesn't, just wasn't their bag or whatever. But usually if I just say, here's the guest list of people that have been on before, that usually does it for people that are in the fishing world. But when I go out to other people that I find inspiring or interesting in some way, shape, or form, that the fishing list doesn't do anything for them, right? So that has been challenging, and mostly it's just challenging for me they're willing to do it. They're just like anybody else. They're like, oh, you want to know my story? I'll tell you my story. What's this going to take, an hour?
Right.
And they're usually pretty happy to do it. But I've reached out to a lot of people, and some I just don't have the proper communication channel with yet. Like, I don't have their cell phone number or whatever. Maybe I'm just emailing them off their website or whatever, and I don't really expect to get that. But for the most part, it's just worked out. Like, the people that I want, for example, there's this one guy that I had tried to get in touch with, and he's a very high profile person in his field. And I just kept sending messages, and they were just not being answered because he doesn't check them. And then somebody that listens to the podcast is like, hey, man, would you ever want to interview this guy? Because he's a friend of mine, and it's the same guy. And so ended up, once I got in touch with him, he's like, oh, yeah, man, I'd love to do that.
So you get introduced by the right channels,
Right.
and then all of a sudden everybody was cozy.
Yeah, but I don't know. I mean, I haven't – have you been turned down?
I haven't been turned down, but I think what happens often is there's guys that want to do the podcast, but they're like, what do I talk about? I'm nervous, let me get prepared. And I try to loosen them up. I'm like, dude, I says, it's not really like that. I says, I'm the dude that gets prepared. I'm the dude that, is going to ask you the questions. Really, what I just need you to do is sit in front of me and talk to me for an hour and a half.
Be yourself.
Right. And then, after they do it, they're like, oh, that was fun, or that was easy, or I had no clue. But I think, I think a lot of the guests think that it's like AM radio where they have to carry it.
Right.
And they don't.
Right. No, not at all. In fact, it's better if they don't carry it. And that is the host's job. And if you're getting that kind of response from your guests, then you're obviously doing a very good job, because the art to interviewing is being so comfortable or creating an environment that's so comfortable that somebody wants to tell you something that they've never told anybody else.
Right.
And that's where the good stuff is. And like with the big personalities, my feeling is that that's where the podcast really shines, is because everybody's heard, somebody like Bill Dance or Roland Martin or Peter Miller or any of these guys. Yeah. They've heard them do their canned thing. Like, you get 10 minutes, you're going to hear pretty much the same thing. But it's an hour into it when now you start to hear some new stuff, and you start to get to know this person on a different level. Right. And the people that are listening, that are choosing to listen to that, they're already fans of this person. They want to know more about this person. And so that's when I think that the podcast is magic, is when it goes beyond the 22 minutes and 30 seconds of a normal television show, when it goes beyond, a radio interview, where somebody might call in and you're going to get maybe 5 or 6 minutes with somebody, and people that do that a lot tend to have kind of the same answer. They have a persona. And when you get them for an hour or an hour and a half, that's the good stuff.
Yeah, that is the good stuff. I also think it's a lot more natural for guys in our position that have been fishing guides, because it's very, very few occupations do people have where they're isolated for a long period of time with nobody else around them, with complete strangers.
Yeah.
So, and if you're good at being a guide, that means you're good at spending the time with those people.
Right.
And then when you can do that, and then to come over and do a podcast, it's like fairly easy.
Yeah, it's pretty similar. I mean, that's kind of what I thought about. Like, I thought of two things when I started the podcast. Like, I used to be a guide out west too, and when I was a fly fishing guide on the Snake River, on the South Fork of the Snake River, we had a camp, and every night you would have a fire and you would tell stories around the fire. And some of those stories are like old stories, some of them are ghost stories, some of them are what happened that day, some of them are how somebody got to be able to afford a trip like that, all different kinds of stories. But the campfire always had a comfortable environment to where, people drink a couple of liquor drinks. Now they're kind of looking at the fire. Next thing you know, they're telling you something about their life that they may not share very often. That's a very comfortable situation. Being on the skiff and polling someone for 8 to 10 hours is also that same kind of thing. And so when I shared the first podcast I ever did, I shared it with one of my friends, and I was like, man, what do you think about this? He goes, I don't know. It sounds like you're just on the boat.
Is that what he said?
Like, yeah. And I was like, sounds like I'm on the boat. And he's like, yeah, when we go fishing, I mean, like, some days we talk about whether if Sasquatch is real, and other days we're talking about, like, you've got a daughter, like, what do you do in this situation or that situation? Or maybe it's parenting, or maybe it's like, I don't know. You just, the conversation just kind of finds its way.
It's real conversation.
Yeah, usually.
And I think that's, whether they know it or not, when they come back from a fishing trip or plan a fishing trip or whatever, in their mind, they think they're buying an experience to catch a fish. But what actually happens out there is, yeah, they catch the fish most of the time. But I think the experience that they actually have at the end of the day was something they weren't really expecting. But there's a demand for it, and there's a value to it that, one, keeps them coming back, keeps the industry alive. And it definitely crosses over with the type of content that a podcast gives. And the fishing guides, whether you're good at it or not, if you do enough trips, you end up having to do it.
Yeah, you'll have to do it. But we also had a conversation at lunch before this about how there's a client for every guide and a guide for every client. And, I think, what I mean by that is, like, if you're a real quiet person and you're not the guy that carries the conversation, there's a clientele that wants to go fishing and doesn't want to talk to anyone.
Right, they'll appreciate it.
Yeah,
sure.
they appreciate that, and maybe just good job, nice cast, something like that is all that somebody has to say, and you will draw the clientele to you that matches your personality and matches your style and all of that. On the other hand, there are people that make a lot of noise and they yell and they scream, and somebody's going to really not like that. And somebody else is going to think, hey, man, that's my kind of guy right there. I love this. Like, we're going to give each other a hard time all day. That sounds not fun to me, but some other people really like that. So there's always that. And I think it's the same thing in the podcast too, that there's certain people that are going to gravitate to a podcast, and there are other people that it may not be their kind of thing. But certainly with the guides, there is a guide for every clientele, and there's a clientele for every guide. Right.
I think that's one of the things I love about the platform that we're on with the podcast. The Waypoint platform. To me, it seems like having a community of different podcasts and having one platform where we can all be on is, you're going to have different people that appeal to different people. And by having the platform with multiples on there, it's like, okay, maybe they're not so much into the Lunker Dog or Captain Jeff or Tom Roland, but they like those kids out of Homosassa.
Right.
Or, the Woman Podcast, totally different. That's out in the Midwest, and they're women, and they're talking about their tournaments and what they're doing. So having the platform with the different types of personalities and able to spread that content through the audience, it's almost like picking a guide.
Yeah.
Oh, this is the person I want to listen to for an hour on my way to work.
Mm-hmm. And I guess you could do that. Like, if you follow the Waypoint, if you subscribe to that, it would feed you different podcasts. So you could just try a bunch of different ones. But yeah, that thing, it seems to be growing quick.
And then who came up with that idea?
With what?
The platform of podcasts on Waypoint.
I think, it was kind of a group think kind of thing. Like, I think the people at Waypoint are always thinking, like, what can we provide the people that like this kind of stuff? How can we provide them more of what they want? Like, what kind of value can we add to this? It's kind of what I've noticed from the Waypoint side, that it's kind of coming from that. Like, how can we serve this community better rather than how can we exploit this community better, or how can we make money in this niche or something like that? It's like the people that are there, they seem to love what they're doing. They want to serve this community of hunters and fishermen.
Mm-hmm.
So podcasting is popular. It's big. People like it. So why wouldn't that be a part of it? You know, because Waypoint has grown into far more than just streaming stuff. Now it's podcasts and
phenomenal job on Instagram.
Yeah,
Waypoint.
Instagram
really does good.
I mean, it's
like
really it grows every day, and I think that's one of those situations, kind of like the thing that we were talking about earlier, that what you think is your biggest weakness is really your biggest strength, and that, you know, for the Waypoint people, biggest weakness is just a bunch of kids without any money and a big idea, right?
Right.
Well, that's also the biggest advantage, because one day you're like, you know what, we really need a podcast network. Okay, well, by the end of the day, you can have one. But, you know, these bigger groups can't move like that. They can't even think about moving like that.
So that's always, you know, TV, big companies, big media, magazines, the big corporate sponsors. They can't be nimble. And for whatever reason, in the fishing industry, it seems to be worse than every other industry. They just they don't bend, you know. By the time they get the message, or by the time they understand what, you know, the masses want, it's almost after the fact. And I don't know why the fishing industry is so slow that way, but it is. And when I decided, I don't know if people know this or not, but when I decided that we're going to spend a lot of time and energy podcasting, I reached out to Tom. I reached out to you, and got some feedback. And I needed somebody from our world, the fishing world, to kind of just talk to a little bit, just get a little information, make me feel like, hey, Jeff, this is the direction you can go in. This is the direction that we're going in. This is how we started, and this is what I think would be good for you. And yeah, it seems kind of minuscule and kind of small, but some of the most minuscule and small things are the biggest help.
Right.
You know, like the old saying, you know, don't mistake simple for easy.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it helped me, and it kind of just, I don't know how to say it, but made me feel comfortable jumping in.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then when you called me to do a podcast with you, I was like, oh, perfect. I can sit down with Tom. I can do a podcast. I can tell my story. And then I also thought it was important because now you knew about where I come from.
Right.
And what I do and what my aspirations are. And then by doing that, made my podcast come to life.
Right. Really?
Yeah. I mean, we tried to do podcasts like 5-6 years ago. And the guys from Salt Strong, you know, they were right there, and we were kind of brainstorming one another about podcasting. So we did some, and nobody listened to them.
Yeah, I was one of the first ones for Salt Strong too. I look back on their deals. You were maybe the first or one of their first interviews, and I was real close there too. And it was kind of an interesting idea. And I got to say, I was even thinking about doing the podcast when they called me. I was like, kind of like you, like, oh, great. Well, I could see how this goes. And, you know, I've thought the podcast is something that I've been wanting to do for many years. And just like a lot of people, sat there and thought about it and never did anything about it.
Right.
And one day I'm like, what is it that's holding me back from doing this? Is it that I don't know what to buy? Like, what if I make a mistake? Like, I'm looking at your rig here, and it's way more sophisticated than what I use. You got a mixing board, you got a computer, and that's kind of, that was kind of my holdup, was like, I don't know what the right gear is, and I don't want to buy the right gear. So there's a podcast that I listen to. It's called Lewis Howes School of Greatness, and he's got a wonderful podcast. And so I was like, I wonder what he uses. And so I get on the internet and look it up, like podcast gear, Lewis Howes. Sure enough, he's got a tour of his studio on YouTube and a list of every single thing that he uses. And these headsets were one of them. And he was like, yeah, we got these other microphones, but pretty much I just use these headsets on most of them. I went specifically, found one where I could see the video of him using the headset. And then I went to iTunes and listened to it, because that's how I listen to most podcasts. And I'm like, I think that's how most people listen to a podcast, is off of iTunes. So I want to listen with the headset that I normally listen to. So I got my AirPods and I listen, and I'm like, wow, that sounds great. Like, if mine sounded that good, I would be super happy. So it was that day I just said, okay, well, this is the stuff I'm getting.
Right.
You know, good or bad, mistake or not, I'd made the jump. And then it sat there for a while, because I still had to put the headphones into this Scarlett thing, and then the Scarlett into the computer. And I made a mistake on one of the first ones. I set up a podcast with a guy that's got a really big podcast, or it was a big podcast. I don't know. He seems to be taking a break for a while, but it's called The Itinerant Angler. And it was the biggest fishing podcast that there was. So I said, well, would you want to do this? And he's like, sure, I'll do it. And so I go there and I interview him for 2 hours, and I lost it. I lost the interview. I lost it. Oh my God. Yeah. I didn't save it at all. It probably wasn't even recording the whole time I was there. I don't know. There was too many buttons and knobs and computers and everything. And I sat there and I just felt like I wasted his time, and it almost died right there. Like, I was like, man, I'm not very good at this. I've wasted this guy's time. I've wasted my own time. It cost a bunch of money to do this, and it almost died. And then I started thinking, okay, I got to get rid of the computer. I got to get rid of everything. And I started doing a little more research, and I figured out how to do it with a much, much simpler rig. I've never lost another one. And it just took me getting started, really. Once I got started,
then it rolled.
Well, I mean, it's rolled very slowly at times, but at least it got going. And but there were a few that particular moment I thought it was over. I mean,
well, you got to fail.
Yeah,
it's kind of important to fail. I tell you, I had a big fail.
Yeah, what?
Well, I was so excited to do the podcast with a live audience and Jared Outlaw. And Jared, we've been doing YouTube together for, I don't know, 7-8 years now. And I like the kid, and he's a great kid and hardworking dude, you know. Exactly the type of person you want to have on your podcast. Plus, he's got a great personality, and he knows about entertaining, and he's not afraid to be in front of a camera or a mic and all that. So we go to the Tarpon River Brewery, and a lot of people show up. They want to see the podcast and watch us do it. And, you know, we promoted it that way. And we were very excited. And we had a good turnout. And people had a great time. But the podcast, let's just say it's hard to listen to. You know, it was loud in the background. And the stories were good. And Jared was great. But it was an epic fail as far as the recording quality and the sound quality. And really, you know, in this type of content, I mean, that's the most important thing. They're going to sit back and listen, and if it's hard to listen to, you failed.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I did that with Jared, who's just, you know, he's your dream guest. He's the guy you want to have, you know, the microphone in front of. And, you know, a little bit of a roller coaster there. I was pretty high about the whole thing, and then I was pretty low about the whole thing, but I'm glad I did it. It was an epic fail, and I know that what you can and can't do as far as the live audience now.
Yeah.
You know.
We had some fails like that in the TV getting started. We filmed the pilot of the show, took it to the network, and they said, this is terrible. Like, you're going to have to go back and do this all over again. On the other hand, sponsors seem to like it. So,
Now, when you do the show and somebody says it's terrible, who's the guy telling you it's terrible?
Well, back then it was the guy that program director for Outdoor Channel.
Okay, so the network.
Yeah, the network. A lot of things have changed like that. The gatekeeper. There is no gatekeeper anymore for the most part. The gatekeeper has been replaced with YouTube and the like. I mean, you can upload your own show. Nobody's going to check your credentials to see if you deserve a podcast. But it wasn't like that. I mean, back when we started the TV show, people needed to know who you were. You needed to have some sort of a credentials that, made it to where made it to where this gatekeeper person was like, okay, well, we can market this. We can, say, these guys won a bunch of tournaments, or this is the Bassmaster Classic champion last year, or whatever it was,
so
whatever your
somebody
credentials.
Needed some sort of validation.
Somebody needed it, yeah. And they just didn't let anybody get on there. And then, at the beginning, there were only, the Outdoor Channel was very small back then, maybe 12 million households.
Right.
And then the next big jump was OLN, Outdoor Life Network, and then there was ESPN. And outside of that, there really weren't many places to put a fishing or hunting show. So you basically have 3, maybe 4 networks, and most of the best slots are going to be on Saturday or Sunday between 8 and 10. So you have 2 hours on 3 networks. That's, what is that, 6 spots.
Right.
So they could, and they've got lots of people coming to them to try to get this time from them, and everybody's willing to pay. So I guess in some way there needed to be some sort of gatekeeper. Like,
right.
They want the best programming they can possibly get, and who's going to monitor that. So,
right, the days of a limited menu.
Right. And then now, or even not long after that, there's 24 hours networks, and then there's 24-hour fishing and hunting networks, and then there's multiple of those, and then there's OLN, it turns into Versus, and Versus into NBC Sports, and you just have more and more and more opportunity to put a show somewhere. So the gatekeeper wasn't as important of a person anymore. But when things really changed was YouTube. Like, now there's no gatekeeper at all, which in some ways I think is fantastic. In other ways, I don't know. Does there need to be a gatekeeper? I don't know. If you're like a capitalist kind of person or libertarian, you say the cream rises to the top and people watch what they want to watch.
Right.
So, okay.
Yeah, that's kind of my philosophy on it.
Right.
I think a lot of the fishing shows when I was younger actually frustrated me, motivated me to want to do YouTube and to show the other side of fishing, because it wasn't structured with a know-it-all expert going to tell you how to do it, where to do it, who to do it with, blah blah blah. And that was like the motivation to actually put the stuff up on YouTube, is like, hey, there's something else out there. Mm-hmm. Thank God YouTube came along. I mean, how cool is it? And I'm a firm believer in the cream rises to the top.
Yeah.
And if you look at the guys that are still doing the fishing shows, in my opinion, those are the guys that should be doing the shows. Where years ago, that wasn't my opinion.
Yeah.
The guys that are doing it now, it's not the only game, so they're choosing, to play that game.
Right. And
because they're choosing to play that game, they're going to make the TV the way it needs to be for TV. Same with YouTubers. I think the podcast is a little different. I think a whole bunch of dudes are gonna, start doing them.
Yeah.
And I think a whole bunch of dudes are going to not do well. I think a bunch of dudes are going to do well.
Well, I think that there is the deal about the podcast of getting started at the right time. Like, you, among others, got started in YouTube at a time where it was very easy to grow that. It's not as easy to grow that today. Start a YouTube channel and try to grow it. It's more challenging today than it was before. At least it seems that way to me. Maybe.
Oh, it is for sure.
And there's just more stuff up there. Every day there's probably millions of videos being uploaded to YouTube every single day, which makes your video that much harder to find, I would imagine. So, if and just like Instagram and Facebook, if you got on Instagram at the right time, it was very easy to grow a big following on Instagram. But if you get on Instagram today, it's much more challenging to build those same numbers,
right?
Because you weren't with this wave of people that were like, oh, Instagram looks cool, I'm starting an account, and they were having millions of people starting an account today. And all of those millions of people are looking for something that they're interested in, whether that's fishing or hunting or whatever it is you're into. There's an Instagram, account for that probably. So if you get on the platform and are aggressive about it early, you reap the benefits of the platform growing. You grow kind of as the platform grows. But once that kind of plateaus, now I think it's very difficult to start an Instagram. I mean, we've seen that just with like Sweetwater, as opposed to the other shows where it was very easy to grow early. And then we started Sweetwater like a few years later, and it was far more challenging to get the same kind of audience.
I remember the first time seeing your shows, I think it was ESPN2.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, wow, ESPN's doing fishing. I'm like, this is going to open up doors. I was like, this is what, we needed. We needed the whole country to be exposed to fishing shows and what it's all about. And I got pretty excited there for a few years, and then I learned more, and I realized that, especially saltwater fishing, only has so many eyeballs.
Well, yeah. But there's still a lot of eyeballs.
No, there's plenty. There's plenty. I'm not so sure that there's enough for ESPN.
Well, probably resulting in ESPN not doing it anymore, in favor of, soccer or something. Or right. And the same things happened on NBC Sports over the years. We've been told, we're probably not going to have an outdoor block next year. We just got the, open wheel racing contract, and so we're going to be doing IndyCar. I'm thinking, really, that many people want to watch IndyCar, on a Saturday morning? But for whatever reason, we would continue to be on there. But they did stop doing outdoor content last year. Yeah. So we were on Discovery Channel, NBC Sports, Sportsman's Channel, and Sun Sports. And then Waypoint, and we won't be on NBC Sports anymore. That one's over.
As far as numbers go, from the old ESPN days, do you think between all the different networks and platforms now, the saltwater fishing, forget freshwater because it's a whole different game and a lot more people, but as far as the saltwater, do you think more people are seeing it and enjoying it, but just not on ESPN2? Do you think they're getting...
So that's an interesting question, the way that you phrased it, because I was all ready to give you an answer. The answer that I was ready to give you was, have the numbers gone down from where they once were on television? And the answer is absolutely yes. My first experience with television was on TNN when Shaw Grigsby asked me to be on his show. We went barracuda fishing. It was on TNN on a Monday night, and they would do almost 1 million people.
Okay.
My phone rang for 8 months, and it was back when we had, tape recording voicemail, right? Like some people listening to this won't even, but you could rewind it and you'd have to write it down, and but for 8 months, every day at the end of the day, my phone, the answer machine is full. and I'm trying to return all these calls. That's where I saw the power of television for the first time. I was like, holy cow.
Right.
I mean, that was amazing. One program. Okay, so that was the heyday of television. That TNN block on Monday night. The next best thing was ESPN. And ESPN used to do about 350 to 400,000 people on a Saturday. OLN would do about 250,000. So at one point we had a show on ESPN. It was only a 2-minute show. It was one of the little short little vignette shows that they had.
Right.
And on that same Saturday we would do OLN. And so we'd do about 350 on ESPN, 250 on OLN. There's no place on standard television that you can get either one of those ratings anymore. Certainly not for a fishing show, and I question even football games aren't doing that on those platforms. But the way you phrased the question was, are more people watching now than before? And I think that I could say yes. There are probably not more people watching the 22-minute and 30-second made-for-television show.
Right.
But when we add in, across all 4 of those networks, we're getting watched. Then Waypoint, and the numbers on Waypoint have been really, really good. And then you add in our social media and Waypoint social media, and then my podcast and the articles that are written and all of that stuff. There's no question that more people are seeing the content today than ever before, but they're just not seeing it at that 1 30-minute
Right, it's
deal.
it's not one distributor.
And so some people would say, well, that was more powerful when 350,000 people are watching you right now, all at the same time. Okay, well, it's just a fluid thing, and I don't know. I mean, it's weird because not as many people are watching the 22-minute and 30-second show, but far more people are watching portions of that show on social media and other things. And so that's kind of interesting. It's a wild world, and it's kind of the wild west of this whole world right now, like distribution and creation of fishing television or any sort of television.
Yeah.
It's a wild
No,
time.
it's crazy wild. I mean, you and I are sitting across from one another. I'm a fishing guide with a YouTube audience, and yeah, I'm doing podcasts now. But do you know how many people would roll up to me and ask me, "Hey, do you know Tom Roland?" Or "Hey, do you know Peter Miller?" Or "Hey, do you know?" Well, Bill Dance put me on the map as far as getting on his TV show 12 years ago. But they watch the Lunker Dog stuff on YouTube, and then they put me on the platform with Tom Roland, that has 3 different TV shows. And it's like the only way that ever could have happened is with, multiple, we'll call them distribution channels, not just TV. Because with TV, that could probably never, ever
the internet has given anybody has the opportunity to make anything they want to out of it. And as you can see, certain people have taken advantage of that, and it's great. I think that with the more opportunity that everybody has, the better it gets for everybody. I would like to say that as more people are able to create content, that all the content gets better. But unfortunately, that doesn't seem to happen. Like, some of the content's not that good, and some of it's fantastic.
Right.
So then I think the cream rises to the top.
Yeah, I think one of the problems that I see with the digital, anything coming out digital, is there's no reward for having artistic value as much. We're like say the old days, Mutual of Omaha had, was it Wild Kingdom?
Right, Wild Kingdom, yeah.
And the amount of artistic value that went into the show, or Flip Fallett's show,
right?
He really went
really
out.
high production quality, and you would see big spikes in your audience,
right?
And you would see big spikes in your sponsorship because of it. And
Right.
and we made big investments in that, like going from one camera to two camera, being one of the first to go all HD, and to see these things happen and say, that investment in quality is going to help us to have a better product.
Right.
And what you're saying is that
A lot
that's
of
not
it-
as important anymore, but I would kind of argue that it's still important, but the barrier for entry has come down considerably. The we had these cameras, they were $100,000, and they were like a beta cam,
Right.
and it was what the guys would run around, shooting news stories on and stuff
Right.
like that.
Right.
And it was your basic rig, and the thing cost about $100,000, lens and everything, and you had these tapes that went in it.
And then you're loading it on a 20-foot
and so,
skiff.
when and you start thinking about, the barrier for entry. Somebody wants a fishing show. Well, you need one of those. Okay, so most people don't do that. That's where it stops right there. And, to really have a good show, you need two of those. And then, not just anybody knows how to operate them. So now you need a guy
Right. You
on
need a
both
crew
of
that
those
can
cameras.
actually deal with it.
Yeah, and then what about an underwater camera? And back in those days, that it was this giant thing. You almost need to put one of those kind of cameras in an underwater housing, and so now underwater is crazy. So you see what has happened. That camera that I'm explaining right there, I wouldn't use it to prop the door open now. I don't even know where it is. It's
Right.
it was one of our most prized possessions, and now it's just a piece of junk. Nobody would even use that thing right now. And now you could go down to Best Buy, and you could, on the shelf right now, there's 25 cameras that are 100 times better than that one. And a kid can buy it with their allowance money.
Right.
And so the barrier for entry to incredible quality has come down greatly. And a kid can buy a drone, and a kid can have the underwater thing can be done with a GoPro on a stick, and in a little box like I'm carrying around for the podcast stuff. You can have more production equipment in there now for, under $2,000 probably, and you could have so much better quality than what we started with. So
Yeah.
that's all changed too.
I'll tell you something funny. Panavision. It used to be the biggest name in filming.
Right.
So, Lamont's doing the production, and he has his Panavision shirt, and I ask him about Panavision. He's telling me how great it is, and, if you really want to have, the right camera shots and blah, blah, you got to have Panavision. So him and I both came out with like a couple $100 when we bought Panavision stock. You want to talk about epic fail. We lost that money, and I don't know what happened to the Panavision stock exactly, but I don't know. I think at the time it was about $20, and I think it's worth about 20 cents now.
If you had bought GoPro, then
Right.
that would have been the place to go.
As long as you sold it in
Yeah,
time.
right.
But anyway, listen, we're into this about 50 minutes. Before we wrap up, because it's a big day and we got a lot of shit to do for LunkerCon. Going into LunkerCon, what are you expecting? What do you think is going to happen there? Because you've never been to one.
I haven't been to one.
And I know you only seen it from the outside looking in.
But I can only imagine that, you got an army full of real guys that like to fish. Guys that like to fish usually like to drink beer, and they like to tell stories. So I would imagine that it's probably going to be a lot of beer drinking and storytelling.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it is.
Yeah.
This year, doing the fundraiser gives us a whole different purpose, which is kind of nice. Captains for Clean Waters, I'm very partial to them because I just know that they're guys like me that really have clean water as the real motive.
Mm-hmm.
Where I can't say that about some of the politicians and some of the other foundations and associations. I think they're so big that they've kind of lost contact with the ultimate goal. And I really feel that Captains for Clean Waters is very in tune with the ultimate goal and has a real plan that's being implemented by real guys, So I'm really happy to raise some money this year at LunkerCon. And I'm totally floored that guys like you the other TV show guys, some of the best fishermen in the world, come together for camaraderie and for everything that we just don't get to do at the fishing seminars and the boat shows
Right.
and the all that different stuff.
Well, that's what I'm excited about, and the reason, there's a couple reasons that I'm here. Over the last year, we've gotten to be friends. So if you're doing something, I want to support it, and I also have become very into the Captains for Clean Water initiative and seeing what they've done and seeing some real change. For them, my main interest with them over other groups, and not really even over other groups. What attracted me to them was that when I talked to them about it, they, I was almost embarrassed that I didn't fully understand the Everglades situation, because I should, right? I mean,
It's complicated.
but it's a complicated problem. So first thing I liked about it was that they patiently walked me through it, not talking down to me, but said, okay, well, here are the issues. Here's how we see them. This is why you don't really fully understand what's going on, because you're down here in the Florida Keys, and this is your Everglades situation with the water getting cut off coming into Flamingo. That's in your world. In the other world, it's the freshwater getting discharged out of the Lake Okeechobee. So the people that are up on the Caloosahatchee River, do they really know or care what's going on in Flamingo? I mean, they're worried about dead fish on their beach right there.
Right.
And so, first of all, they patiently walked me through this whole thing so that I could fully understand it. Then I was really surprised with how positive they remained. That it's like, oh, damn, okay, that's a bad problem. So how are we going to fix it? And they're like, oh, well, there's all kinds of stuff in place. And in fact, if they would just do what's already been in place, we would be making big roads to fixing this situation, or really improving the situation. So then I kind of understood, okay, there's a path to getting there.
Yeah.
And here are some leaders, there's some people that weren't leaders. Here are some people that were willing to step up and become a leader and educate and raise money and do the things necessary to lead our group to a victory of sorts, to where, the only victory is that it's better than it was before. It's the best it's ever been in our lifetime. And we can clearly see that is possible.
Yeah.
By remaining super positive. It doesn't do much for me when people are pointing fingers and calling people names and stuff. Like, I just don't think that that's productive, and especially when you're doing it to a politician or whatever, or to another group, or you're placing all the blame on somebody.
Yeah, picking sides doesn't work.
It just doesn't. Well, it may work in your mind, but what it does to somebody that knows only a little bit about this situation is they go, "Ooh, that seems like bad drama I don't need in my life right now." So now I'm just not even. I'm sure that those people are going to fight it out amongst themselves and come up with a solution, so I don't have dead manatees on my beach right here. That's not what we want. What we want is for that person that has a slight interest in this issue, which anyone that lives in the state of Florida, or anyone who's ever come to the state of Florida, should have a slight issue with, water quality, right?
Yeah, right.
Well, we want those people to feel comfortable in being a part of this, not
a part of the solution.
Damn, man, I don't want to go get yelled at. I don't want somebody to confront me like that. That's terrible. Why would anybody want to be part of that? Like, no, let's calmly, patiently educate people in a way that it doesn't seem like we're pushing some agenda on them, and educate them to the point to where they want to be a part of. Oh, it's just as simple as voting for the right person. It's just as simple as saying yes on this on when I vote next time. Okay, I understand. That's fine. I can do that. That's great. Because who wants a bad economy, and who wants bad water quality, and who wants a bad smelly beach? Nobody.
Right.
Nobody wants that.
Well, especially the guides.
Well, of course.
You know?
I mean, but my feeling is always like, the guides are going to understand. The fishermen are going to understand. This is we're the bellwether. We're the canary in a coal mine, right? It's but there's only so many of us,
Right.
and there's only so much that we can do. It's the casual tourist, it's the restaurant owner, it's the guy that, unfortunately, the guy that rents jet skis on the beach. We need all of these people to be a part of the solution, not blame
Right.
them.
Not point
like,
fingers.
Good water benefits everyone in all kinds of ways. So I'm all for like bringing these people in and teaching them in some way to where it's not like confrontational or uncomfortable. It's like, oh, I had no idea that putting all this fertilizer on my lawn was creating this huge problem. Okay, I won't do that anymore.
Right.
Okay. And and while you're at it, let's talk about maybe who might be a good choice for leadership because they like this.
Well, I tell you that one of the strengths I see in Captains for Clean Waters is they're going to keep the politicians in the state of Florida in check.
I hope so.
Well,
I mean,
they would blatantly have to not listen to them and ignore them
right.
in order.
And I don't really care if the politician really feels like clean water is important. I could really care what his own personal opinion is if he gets behind it and does the things that create clean water for the future is all I care. And a politician could say, hey, look, that seems like a great opportunity to ride this. I'm going to be a hero of the conservation movement.
Right.
Okay, well, whether you really feel like clean water is important or not, let's just clean the water up, and you can go do whatever you want to with it. You can ride that right into the White House for all I care. I really don't care. I just want the water cleaned up. I just want a solution so that the Everglades is the best it's been in the last 50 years, instead of looking at a situation to where it's like, man, we keep going like this could be really bad for everybody. Yeah. So I think they're doing a really good job. The other reason that I'm excited to come to this event is because in this day and age of social media, digital stuff like we were talking about, there seems to be like the more people want to ingest like Twitter and Instagram and stuff like that, they're on the other end of it. They want to ingest a hour and a half podcast. They want to get to know somebody. But then there's this feeling of personal connection too, where you see events like this, where it brings people together and you get to actually talk to somebody in person. You get to actually shake somebody's hand and you can talk to them. Like, that's cool. That's really super cool. And what you've created here, I think that's why most of the people are saying, yeah, I'll be a part of that. That seems really cool. It's going to raise money, and I'm going to get to, there might be somebody there that wants to meet me, and I'm going to give them that opportunity. It's going to be great, and I want to meet them too. So I think what you're doing is awesome.
Well, we're really glad to have you, and thanks for spending the time to do a podcast with us. It was long overdue, and thank you again for putting me on your podcast way back when. And let's have a blast tonight at LunkerCon.
Right on.
And run that dog.